If I hit the button, I swear.
There we are. We are live. Welcome. Today we are talking about my recently published and international bestseller, The Impact of Silence, with Becca and Michael. And we're going to explore a little bit about what silence means to us and how we move through it, and really, this book is about stepping into the truth of who we are, beyond our stories, beyond the noise of the world around us, beyond the things that we were told when we were young of who we are and who we were and who we were supposedly supposed to be based on our parents in school and church, and what it means to heal.
Sounds like a good journey.
It's an amazing journey. When we say yes to ourselves, and this is part of really some of the work that, I've done with myself and I do with clients, it's like sometimes all it takes is saying yes to moving forward. We don't need to know how it's going to end up, because I think we all have multiple paths. And when we say yes and we take that first step, that opens us up to different possibilities. And had we not taken that first step and tried to hold on to, I need to know how this is going to work, we close ourselves off from messages that we would otherwise get when we just say yes and we let go of having to know how things are going to turn out.
So I don't know if I'm the norm or not, but I would say, of course I want to say yes, right? Like, why wouldn't I say yes? But it doesn't feel safe. I think that is like my biggest hang up is like, can I handle yes? Is that a safe thing to do or say? Does that make sense at all?
It does. And one of the things that I've learned is that spirit will never give us more than we can handle.
I don't feel like that sometimes.
Well, and the thing is if you think about when you've resisted saying yes, how much time and energy, most of it mental energy, have you used in resisting moving forward, versus sometimes when you've said yes and you've stepped into what is that wants to be healed. Yes, it can feel crappy for a little bit of time. Then when you're free, you're free. It's like you don't have the mental chatter anymore. And we can sometimes spend more time in resistance than if we just took the time, because we're going to feel the feelings no matter what, unless we resist them for the rest of our lives. And so it can be maybe feeling crappy.
Is that an option?
Well, how many lifetimes do you want to keep ignoring things?
True. All right.
What are your thoughts? Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Nope, please.
When I first heard the title of your book, and you were even just speaking right now, you're talking about silence, and then of course in my head I'm saying the impact of silence, and to me it was almost like inside I make silence equal survival. Maybe not intentionally. I mean, yes, intentionally, maybe not consciously.
So when you were young, that may have been the MO. Because if you grew up in a household where it wasn't safe to express yourself, either the person that you are or verbally your words, then it is safer to be silent. And that can be survival.
I would say I've experienced that even in my adult life.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe to a larger degree.
And so it's understanding, where it's safe to share and where it isn't, because we can't share everything with everyone, nor are we meant to. Brene Brown, talks about sharing things with people who, kind of deserve or have a right to hear certain things from you. And, going in and telling your boss that you think they suck is not a wise career move. And yet, if you find that you're constantly silenced by a boss or a coworker, It could be a signal that that is a healthy environment for you, and to move on your own timeline. And I found, having 27 years on Wall Street, work is the perfect environment for us to heal some of our childhood wounds. And it can feel like a bunch of 5-year-olds on the playground as you sit in a corporate meeting. And so it's really determining, if I don't feel safe in this situation, why? Because typically people aren't doing anything personally towards us. It's just like if you're still mad at your brother for stealing your truck when you were 4 and he was 3. He was a child. Why do we continue to hang on to that anger? And yet, if a coworker is doing something that's bringing up those same feelings, it's not blaming the coworker because they're acting out of their own internalized emotions. It's like looking at, why am I being triggered? And is this an opportunity for me to understand where this is coming from and to sit within my own silence? And silence can also be journaling. It's allowing the words to flow through you onto a piece of paper, because it's really asking to understand at a deeper level what's behind this so that I'm no longer triggered.
So that's the question, right? Like, if we're going to sit in silence, and I love that you said journaling is an opportunity as well, because recently I was at a conference and they kept talking about stillness and the value in stillness and silence. And I just thought, like, I have a hard time sitting still and silent. I'm either going to fall asleep because I get really comfy and I don't get much sleep. So like, that's good, but I don't think that was the point to the stillness. Or I have a hard time making my head just sit still. But when I get that pen and paper and I just start to write, even when I'm not sure where to start, it's amazing what can come out. But I do think that starting with an intention, I forget your words already, but kind of like, what is this here to teach me?
Mm-hmm.
What were your words? I lost your words already.
I don't even, but really it's like, what's here for me to understand?
Yeah.
And this is where, whether you want to call it spirit or archangels, angels, support team, are always waiting to help us. And it's really up to us to ask. And so sometimes as I'm going to sleep at night, I ask, what is there for me to see? What am I not seeing here in this situation? What is here for me to learn? What is here for me to heal? I'll sometimes do that before I go out on a walk, and I'll do a walking meditation. And there's a river walk across the way from me, and I'll sit in front of the stream. And so that is silence as well. So it's not just, it's very rare that we can completely clear our minds. And so silence doesn't mean just sitting and being in bliss, which is nice. It really is. It's connecting in with the higher wisdom that's waiting to come in to guide us on our journey.
So tell us a little bit about your journey of this book.
The idea of this came to me about 5 years ago, and I was working with a group of people, and what initially came was the negative impact of silence. And it was poo-pooed by them, and we were doing some PR work around my first book. And I finally sat down to write it, I guess about 2 years ago. And I thought this book was going to be all about boundaries. And the first draft really was. And because this is a lot of the work that I do with clients and part of what I teach, because for anyone who grew up in a household around addiction or mental illness or abuse, typically there were no boundaries. And we create them as a way to protect ourselves and carry those on into adulthood. And rarely do they continue to support us. And I was about a year into writing this. I had second developmental draft, and something told me that the book just needed to be put down for a little bit. And a few months later, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which was a year ago. And in the process of going through this healing journey, which I'm still on, there were many lessons for me to learn. And this is where I connected in with what is the energy of the cancer within my body? What's here for me to heal? So the breast cancer took me on a healing journey, some of which is included in this book. And so maybe 10% of what was in the original
Oh,
draft
wow.
is in this book.
Huh.
And so it's had a life of its own. And really, this is a book. It's my gift of healing and love to anyone who wants to go deeper into their own journey. There's an invitation in every chapter for the reader to understand how they've systemically been silenced, how the family has silenced them, how we continue to silence ourselves, and to really step deeper into our journey of forgiveness. And really, forgiveness is all for us. We can't absolve anybody for anything that they've done, and yet we can step into a place of seeing them in a different light. There's a great book called The Impersonal Life, and really 99.9% of what happens to us is for us, and it's not personal. And so when we can step into that mode of being in the world and of not being attached to the old hurts and the old wounds, to heal them, and really a lot of this also is self-forgiveness. Because Lord knows I did a lot of abuse to my own body, as on top of the abuse that I experienced when I was a child. And a lot of those energies were internalized. And I would not have gone on the healing journey that I've been on if breast cancer hadn't happened.
Michael, have you silenced yourself, or do you feel like we have silenced you here so far?
I mean, I've spent most of my life silencing myself, right? Allowing myself to be silenced, putting myself in situations to always be silenced, recreating old broken dynamics so that I was silenced once again, right? Because it was my safe space. Didn't believe in myself, didn't feel I was worthy of being real close to people, being vulnerable to people, and building real bonds. So I silenced myself, and I shared surface, or I shared some depth and kept a lot of it internal, and isolated myself and blocked myself off, right? And as I've gone on this healing journey, and as I will continue, I look back and in an objective way, and it's so systemic generationally. It's systemic systems. Every system is systemic right now. All we do is silence, right? And it goes to, the psychiatric field, which is enormous, and big pharma, my buddies, it's about, all they do is silence, right? They silence the pain. That's all they do is numb it. They don't heal it. They don't take you on a journey to heal yourself. They just numb you, right? That's how systemic it is. And those are the people that are lining the pockets of every single person that gets elected in this country. No matter what the party is, doesn't matter. They're all getting lined by same big pharma companies for the same big pharma reasons. And it goes into almost all diseases, right? Like, there's a reason that cancer treatment hasn't changed in 100 and something years, like, because it's profitable for them and it's a lot of money. They don't want people being healed, because if you're healed, then you're of no use to them. There's a reason our food has so many additives and all this crap in it, because if you have a healthy society, then there's no reason for big pharma and all these medications. Now, did they probably go to the tipping point and go a little too far and made too much of the population, dependent on meds? Probably. And now you see the dysfunctional society that we live in, where our two presidential options are horrible, right? Like, I mean, we're the largest free country in the world, and these are our options. So
And we're not really that free.
Right.
We're not as free as we think we are. And
right. In theory, in concept, idealizations, we are, right? And the reality is we've all been silenced, right? Media points an angle. We have to listen to one side or the other, or create our own narratives. And are you creating your narratives on one side of the story or on the other side of the story? In every way, shape, or form, the way that this world currently exists, if you buy into mainstream anything, you are being silenced in some way, shape, or form. The only way not to be silenced is to heal within and go as deep within as you possibly can on a continuous, never-ending healing journey until the day we die. And how deep you are willing to go is the more universal or objective truth you're able to find. And objective truth goes beyond your perspective, beyond the other person's perspective. It's that third layer of truth that everybody always talks about. In any side of an argument, there's three stories, right? There's the truth, then there's both sides. So how do you get to that objective truth? Well, you just keep peeling those layers, right? When am I going to let somebody close again? Am I going to let somebody that close again? Am I willing to be that vulnerable to allow that to happen to me, to put myself in that position? I know I deserve it. I know I'm worthy of it. But am I ready to actually allow that to happen? And I don't know. That's the truth. I really don't know. I know that I have no problem sitting in my own silence and suffering, and I'll just sit there in it. That I know. But I also know that doesn't work as much for me anymore. It's not something that's productive, and I do a lot more writing when I do get there. But also that's still not productive because I still don't have that human connection, and we are beings that need a human connection. So closing my whole self off to that, is that beneficial? And I don't know.
Yeah, and
go ahead, Stephanie.
I was going to say, and part of this is, we as human beings crave connection. That's part of why we're here. And yet one of the first things we do as we turn on the noise of the outside world when we're young that tells us how we're supposed to be and who we're supposed to be, we turn off our own internal knowing. And part of the journey of this book is really of turning off the noise of the outside world and coming back to self. And there's a lot of noise out there. I talk about some of it in the book, and we could go down rabbit holes about religion and school and pharma and the news in general. There's an incredible amount of noise out there. And when we make the choice to say yes to listening to ourselves, this is when the shift begins.
So I think it's interesting. And one of the things I love about your book, Stephanie, is that, we can look at the political choices that we have. And like you said, we can look at that education, we can look at this, we can look at that. But I'm going to take the flip side of it for just a second, because to me, I'm not saying any of that's not true, but it's a whole lot of blaming, or it's a whole lot of pointing. And right. And at that point, we've given up our control yet again. And so I don't think that we got to this place because of any negative intended person that was like, I am going to create the dependency on processed foods, or I'm going to create dependency so that I can get rich. I mean, yes, there's that part of it, but I think all of that has been created because of each individual who's not healed. Does that make sense? So like you said, when we start to listen to the outside noise as we're growing up, we don't know any different. And Exactly. One of the things that your book is allowing or doing is it's starting to spread the knowledge that just because we are who we are and this is what we've created, it's not that somebody's out there trying to hold us down. We are holding ourselves down, each individually, and then collectively, it just is this huge weight. And so as people start to learn things that they didn't realize, now that starts to open it up. And to me, that just coming from that perspective just feels like a whole lot lighter. Like we actually have control over this, right? Like we're not really being held down. And it's not that we're not free because our country isn't what it says it is. It's because each individual person, and then as we all come together as a collective, we've done it to ourselves, but not intentionally. This was the better versus what we used to have. Look at medicine. I mean, can you imagine if we didn't have medicine? So big pharma, although it's got its issues, it also has brought to us, I mean, Stephanie, just I realized some of the treatments were not optimal, and I think you chose to go another direction. But, there are some people that's what saves their life.
Absolutely. And I think
any different too.
Right. And so this is where we take responsibility to make different choices for ourselves. And responsibility is really, just because we were taught a certain way doesn't mean we have to continue it. You can teach an old dog new tricks.
And they can learn them too, because we
We
can sometimes
can.
try and teach and they choose not to learn.
And so this is where we're all on our own individual journeys. And this is where we get to every single day, we have a choice of how we want to be in the world, whether we want to react or act. Frankly, I would rather act from a conscious space rather than react to the old wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where we start to make the shifts, because we have no control over anybody else. The only thing that we really have control over is ourselves. And even on my healing journey, I made the conscious choice to work with mostly natural medicine and some allopathic medicine, because my body had already been through enough trauma. I didn't want to traumatize it more with systemic chemo and then radiation. And I'm healing. And that was the right choice for me. Will it work for everybody else? Not necessarily. And that's okay. And this is where, as we're on this journey, it is stepping away from blame and judgment of ourselves and of others. And when we do that, that quiets a lot of the noise as well. I went to Al-Anon for years, which is for families of alcoholics. And there's a phrase in there, when I point a finger, 3 are pointing back at me. So when I'm sitting in judgment of someone, it's really an opportunity for me to look within. Because if we can look at everyone and think of them as a young child, there's a purity that's there in all of us. And we can choose to see people very differently and, as they are, not as we want them to be.
So we talked a little bit before this, and you were sharing some of the surprises that you felt like you found through this journey of writing your book. Do you want to share a couple here?
Absolutely. I interviewed dozens of people. And one of the things that it wasn't surprising that family relationships was one of the biggest challenges growing up. As adults, it continues to be the biggest factor and biggest challenge for people's family relationships. Because in many ways, when we get together with family, it's like we're all turned into 5-year-olds again. And all the old wounds and all the old hurts come back up. And I'm still pissed at my younger brother because he stole my truck when I was 4 and he was 3. And he was just being a kid. And, there's nothing to be upset about.
But there are stories that get created around that go on for a long time, right? Like, it's not just that one day of that truck being stolen. Now there's this story that starts to develop, and we keep it with us.
And it adds, and that's part of the internalized energy that we carry, because one of the things that I do with my clients is, we pinpoint really the source of where these things are coming from and then clear the energy. I call them our layers of cake. And all of our distractions are the icing. And really they build upon each other. And how freeing it is to understand where these things are coming from, so that we can get together with family and we're not taking the bait if someone hasn't done their healing, because not everyone's on the same trajectory as we are. And, how nice it can be to go to a family function and just be with people.
So that was something that I would say I struggled with, was how do you see somebody for who they are, and not hope that they are something that you feel like they could be, because that's not healthy for either person involved, right?
Right.
That's not fair to them, and that's not functional for you.
Right. And this took practice, is to, when I was triggered, understanding why I was triggered, and doing a lot of journaling and some FU letters and burning ceremonies and understanding why I remained in judgment. And then making the conscious choice that when I did get together with family, that even when they threw out the bait, I was not going to bite on the hook. Even if I had to get up and walk out of the room, take a whole bunch of deep breaths,
So bait looks like a comment that maybe is an opinion that they expect to get a certain response.
Yes. And then had I responded in the old way, then that justifies them in feeling the way they did. And a lot of this is subconscious. They don't even realize that they're making these comments in a way so that they can feel empowered, which is all based on the old stories and the old energies that we carry. So it's a fascinating dynamic that when we can see ourselves as if we're sitting in the balcony of a theater, and even to replay an old situation in our minds, and it's like we're looking at it taking place on the stage in front of us, and you can see who said what and their actions and their reactions, and it's quite fascinating to see what I call the spider web of interconnections, and to not be emotionally attached.
Yeah.
It's incredibly powerful.
For me, I think at the core of that stuff comes from self-forgiveness, right?
Mm-hmm.
And once I can truly get to the point where I have forgiven myself, then I automatically forgive them also, right? Like purely forgive them. It's easy to say I'm sorry. It's easy to say, oh, I forgive you. But if that incident still triggers you, if that action still triggers you, if that action still brings some type of reaction in us, then we're not really forgiving them or ourselves, right?
Right.
So it's to get to the point that we become the observer, right? Like the movie theater, the observer.
Mm-hmm.
And, my trip down to Florida over the holidays was a great test to that, because it brought me back to my old dynamics after 2 years of a healing journey, 2 years of being stranded in Arkansas, having my kids, them not seeing my kids for 2 years, them never meeting my youngest, right, who was 4.5. So it was this going into this old ocean of different jellyfish, and how am I going to navigate? And the truth of the matter is, I had to trust myself, understand myself, and just know that I already let that stuff go. And when those comments did come, I didn't react because there was no reaction to it anymore.
And how powerful did that feel?
I didn't acknowledge it until after COVID went away, because I
Mm-hmm.
also got COVID at the end of that trip. So I didn't acknowledge it until 10 days later. But it's okay. Like, it was unbelievably magical. Like, it really was. I was able to just be in my old environment without it having any impact on me whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
It was really remarkable.
With it actually having absolutely had an impact on you, just significantly different than what you're used to.
Yes. Yes.
Which
Because,
is right, everything impacts us.
right.
What we're looking for is to be able to move through this world with ease and experiencing joy. And you gave me some pictures and whatnot. You were able to take in that experience and enjoy your kids being at the ocean, and you could enjoy what was around you. I've said enjoy like 6 times, but like you were able to, I can't come up with another word, but you did, right? And had you been upset or triggered or pulled in by the old stories, you wouldn't have been present enough to really soak up what was right there in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, like the old stories of I'm not a good father, the old stories of I'm not enough, the old stories of, somebody's going to label me something and I have to live into it, right? And there was many labels, many labels, lots, way too many for a dictionary to hold. But it's remarkable, right? Like, I mean, it was just so easy to fall back in, but because I was at a space where I was then, and I'm completely different space now, 6 months or whatever months later. I don't even know what month this is. It's almost April. Apparently it's 3.5, 4 months later. Not 6, but this continuous evolution, right? Mm-hmm. And words that were thrown out, like so many of them, any of these labels, so many. You're never going to make it by yourself. Why are you not moving down here? Why are you moving up to Pennsylvania? Why, the micromanaging of my life and almost trying to sabotage my thought process without them even realizing it, right?
I was going to say, and my suspicion, it was done with very positive intent. Like, they worry about you and they want the best for you and your kids, and they want to be exposed to your kids. And so it's really coming from a good place, so they believe,
Right.
which I think makes it that much more of a, I'll just call it a head game.
Yes.
But it
Yeah,
makes it that much messier.
and this is where we can thank them for their input and choose to swipe left on it.
I like that.
You know what it was?
Really, because otherwise we're silencing the other person.
Right.
And whether it's their own old emotions or stories, or they haven't done their healing, or they're wishing the best, not unlike my journey of healing. A lot of my family doesn't agree with what it is that I'm doing. And I thank them for their concern. I've had conversations saying, I know you love me and I know you want the best for me. And please trust that I'm making the best decision for me. So it's acknowledging them. And then it's really a please acknowledge me where I am. Even if you don't agree, that's okay. We don't have to agree.
Yeah. I mean, I found myself with a lot less resistance. It wasn't fighting the comments. It wasn't fighting what they believed about me. It was honestly proving different through actions and showing different by how my children reacted. You know, they showed their own healing. They showed their own work that they've been doing. They've shown, how they've changed so much drastically. And it's not a straight line. It's not a linear journey. I mean, everybody that knows me knows my son is going through hell and high water right now. It's not linear, but you know what? As a parent, I can only do what I think is best at the moment to help him.
Exactly.
And guide him and support him. And
it
brings a lot of fear and it triggers me a lot, truthfully. But, at the end of the day, I'm just going to make whatever the next best right decision is at that moment. And I'll deal with what comes out of it. As someone told me today, I'm trying to remember who, but someone mentioned that to me today. And
as long as you keep moving, I think that's the key. When the fear starts to paralyze us or to keep us stuck, then, spirit, universe, God, whoever can't help, because we're literally saying no, no, no. But as soon as you at least take a step, right, wrong, or whatever, things can shift and will change, and the right people will show up and the right information will show up. You just have to move.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, it's getting late, and I know you both have to run. I believe Stephanie's running to a radio show that's live.
Before you do that, hold up your book. Did we get to see your book? I love it.
I believe I put the link in the comments also.
You did, yes. The Impact of Silence. And self-mastery practices for women. Oh, it's also for men as well. Stepping into your power and embodying the happiness that's your birthright. I'm trying to hold it straight. And the subtitle is Heal Generational Appropriations and Reclaim the Sovereignty of Your Soul. It is available on Amazon. And people can also get to it via my website, which is wayofthediamondwarrior.com.
And once they've read the book and accepted the invitations at the end of each chapter, if they are then in a place where they would like further help, you do coach people.
I do. I work one-on-one with people, and it's coaching and intuitive healing and guidance. And I offer people a complimentary Explore the Possibilities call, because it's really, this is a sacred journey. And it's making sure that both I and my clients are aligned, and that they're willing to step into this, and that I feel right for them and they feel right for me. Yes.
Thank you for writing the book.
Thank you. It is an honor to have it out in the world, and truly my gift of love and healing to everyone who reads it and says yes to the invitation.
Thank you both for being here. And Becca, as always, thank you for taking the lead when I don't feel like it or don't want to. And everybody have an amazing day.
Thank you both.
Take care.
Bye, world.